time for the Ron and Brian podcast. Get ready to fill your ears with the latest news, politics, current events, and whatever else we feel like talking about this week. And now, your hosts, Ron and Brian.
And good evening, everybody. It's Sunday night. It is 8 o'clock, and it is time for episode 260 of the Ron and Brian podcast. Brian, my friend, how are you doing tonight?
Ron, I'm going to say that anytime I am sitting across from a computer monitor 2+ hours away from you, but knowing that I get to spend the next 60 minutes fully engaged, 100% of your attention, just focused all on me, and you have my full attention.
Do I, though? I feel like you let your attention wander at times.
I think I used to, and I think that once we started doing the video, that changed. I mean, longtime listeners of the show will remember that, in the early days, seasons 24, 25, when we were doing audio only versions of the podcast, it was odd to just basically sit in a room staring at a computer, internet browser and just hear your voice. It was like the voice of God would come in. Then, everybody jumped over to video conferencing when the pandemic hit. Sure. That was when I was able to really, we upgraded our systems thanks to our Patreons who helped fund some of the cost for us to upgrade our capabilities. And that was when I was able to see you. And that's when I think I feel I can stand on firm ground with the statement that you have my undivided attention.
All right. Well, then let's get right to it. It's time for Drink of the Week.
Drink of the Week.
Na zdrowie.
Salud.
Drink of the Week.
Cruncher.
Drink of the week. Drink of the week. Drink of the week.
Brian, what are you drinking this week, my friend?
Ron, I do love a good Pilsner.
Oh, you do.
And today I am drinking a Bushwick Pilsner from Braven Brewing Company. Ron, the Pilsners of Bushwick are legendary. Few remember it today, but the Bushwick section of Brooklyn was one of America's leading brewing centers through the 1950s, 60s, into the 70s. Its Pilsners were unique for more reasons than just their highly hopped character. This is a return of the style that made Bushwick famous. This Bushwick Pilsner, it's old school, dry and refreshing. It's a ballpark-ready, crushable brew. Your granddad would love this beer. Coming in at a 5.5 ABV, Beer Advocate gives it a score of 82. In the past, I've had this beer at PJ Carney's and Citi Field. Ron, this is Bushwick Pilsner from Braven Brewing Company.
Liked beer?
So take a sip. I mean, you've had it before. I assume you enjoy it.
Just crushable. That is a crushable Pilsner.
And you know why having a crushable beer is so important right now, Brian?
Tell me why, Ron.
Because it's Hot Podcaster Summer.
Hot Podcaster Summer.
I love Hot Podcaster Summer. It's really my favorite time of the year.
It really is the best time of the year.
Ron?
Yes.
What are you drinking?
So I pulled something out of the fridge from our good friends at WeldWorks Brewing Company out of Greeley, Colorado. The reason I did, Brian, I was out at a place today, and I had a beer from WeldWorks, a collaboration with Other Half Brewing here in Philadelphia. It was a extra broccoli double IPA, and it did not have broccoli in it. Don't know why there's broccoli in the name, but it was just way over the top hoppy, just not enjoyable. But then I realized I had a can from WeldWorks in one of my Tavor shipments, and this is their German chocolate cake stout mixed with their milk stout, Brian. It's a milk stout with pecans, coconut, dark chocolate, milk sugar, vanilla, and natural flavors. It is clocking in pretty low for a stout, only 5.5%, but it's definitely dark like a piece of German chocolate cake. Let's have a sip here and see.
That looks beautiful.
It's not bad. It's it's a little too sweet. If I
Too
were
sweet.
too sweet. I mean, again, you definitely get the chocolate flavor. You get the coconut. You get the lactose, which I know you're a big fan of, but just really too sweet.
Which is odd because I think as you get older, your taste buds become a little bit more refined. I think when you're in your 20s or and younger, you are just all about, how sweet can this be?
Right.
Now it's just like, you know what? No, there are things that are too sweet.
A lot of comments from last week. Janelle, hoping my beer isn't over 5 years old. This one's actually relatively new. It even said on the can, "Keep cold, drink now." And Billy apparently liking the extra half broccoli beers.
Now, is that the
we have an international
brewery?
commenter saying, as an Italian, it surprises me how famous beer is in other countries. It's all we have here to drown our sorrows in week after week.
I think beer is a global it's a global beverage.
And Allie, bringing the hot questions to the table right off the bat. Why does Hot Podcaster Summer start 3 weeks before summer for everyone else? That's because that's how special Hot Podcaster Summer is. I mean,
the world. We did once have a hot podcaster pre-summer soundbite. Right. It was not well received by the masses. It did not. It didn't score well. The Q rating was quite low for Hot Podcaster pre-summer. And then when we rolled out Hot Podcaster Summer. I mean, through the roof.
Yes.
Through the roof. I mean, do you remember when we had that gentleman who was living in Upper Manhattan that basically took his family hostage because we had crossed Labor Day and no longer were we playing Hot Podcaster Summer? And he actually, through the police negotiators, the hostage negotiators, they, just cream of the crop with the NYPD. The only way he was going to let his children go free was that if you were to take the train up to New York, and do that soundbite again, Hot Podcaster Summer.
I don't want to overdo it too much.
God damn it. And then I would be on all fours, lubed up with a ball gag in my mouth while I made that noise afterwards.
All right. I mean, I think there's nothing we can follow that up with except for Beef of the Week.
Ron and Brian's Beef of the Week.
Brian, what's bothering you this week?
I'm going to throw out there a petty, it feels petty. It feels very petty. As a loyal listener of the show would know, this past weekend, I went down to Atlantic City for the AC Beer and Music Festival. It's a tradition I like to do every year. Was not able to go last year. This year, our friends over at Ocean Hotel were so kind enough to reach out and say, "Hey, listen, we'd like you to go. Here's some. We'd like to give you some VIP tickets." So you were unable to attend this weekend.
I was tied up, unfortunately.
It was disappointing. I know that they had given us 4 tickets. They wanted it to be, be able to say Ron and Brian were attending. However, in Atlantic City, what they do is they take over Bader Field, which is the old airport space. I saw Metallica do their Orion Fest there probably, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, possibly more. So there's over 100 different brewers, each one set up under a tent with a table, providing you with 2-ounce pours, depending on you know, how generous the pour is. Sometimes
Right.
you get a little bit more, but it's a
bit.
2-ounce pour. And you get to try, there's hundreds of beers. Some of these brewers show up with 8 different beers. Some of them have special taps that, you know, come back at 4 o'clock. We're going to be, we've got a small amount of this, you know, special beer, whatnot. Since we had the VIP access, we were able to get 30-minute entry prior to the general admission entry. So we got in at 1:30 and really had basically the entire festival grounds almost to ourselves. There was no line. We were able to just walk up to any brewer, get a pour, sample a couple, move on to the next one. Glorious half an hour. Let's put it this way. Before 2 o'clock, I was already feeling inebriation.
Nice.
It's in 30 minutes, just really putting it down. This is my beef. Once the general admission peasants, as we were calling them, entered, from that point on, throughout the entirety of the beer festival, from 2 to 6 o'clock, there was, at any brewer, I would say a minimum of 15 to 20 people waiting in line for a beer. Which, if they were giving you a 12-ounce beer and you could just walk around sipping it, that would be one thing. But it is absolutely ludicrous to ask me to wait in line 10 minutes for a 2-ounce pour of a beer.
I would agree with
you. Had we not gotten in a half an hour early and filled our bellies with lovely, hoppy beverages, it was a great time. But having had the ability to just experience no lines, the lines were just way too long, and that was my beef. So basically, after 2 o'clock rolled by, I did not have much beer.
See, one thing you have to say about our good friends over at Broken Goblet Brewing, when we go to Hoppy Halloween every October, they cap the ticket sales at a number to where I think I've never been more than like 2 or 3. Had 2 or 3 people ahead of me in line, so it's just very quick getting to the different beers. So I agree with your frustration there.
That's my beef of the week. Ron,
yes.
What's bothering you?
So this week, Brian, it is the availability of old TV shows on streaming services. I think some of you will remember when the pandemic began years ago. My wife decided to rewatch all of Dawson's Creek on Netflix, all 7 or 8 seasons, and I was subject to sitting there watching, Dawson, Pacey, Jen, Jughead, I think was one of them. But again, having to watch all of those for just weeks on end was just painful. And now, Brian, I thought maybe that was the worst show I would ever watch. But now she has found Felicity on Hulu and is now going through. And Matt's shaking his head because he's a big Kerry Russell fan. But watching Felicity makes me long for the days of Dawson's Creek.
Can you walk me through, because I have never seen an episode of Felicity. Can you walk me through the plot? Give me the elevator pitch.
The plot is a bunch of college kids with maturity levels of 50-year-olds, even though they're in their teens and 20s.
Sure.
With basically everything you could want in life, finding ways to be upset with their lives.
Okay, where does it take place?
New York, I believe.
Okay. What is Felicity's the main character?
Correct. That's Kerry Russell.
Now, has she cut her hair yet?
Not yet. This is very early.
Yes. And how many episodes have you watched so far? How deep into it are we?
I watched 2 today, just sitting there on my phone while because unfortunately, if she's like, "Do you want to watch anything?" I'll be like, "Nah, I don't feel like watching anything." And then she'll be like, "Will you mind if I put on Felicity?" And
Sure.
I'm like, "All right, just it's mindless background noise."
Sure.
So, yes, Allie, right on point here. She picked a school based on a dude, Ben. Ben, I've picked up is the love of her life, even though right now she's dating Noel. That's all I can tell you.
Is there any? And it's multiple seasons, correct?
I'm sure. I think it probably went like 5, 6, or 7 seasons. I'll be traveling for work the next couple of days, so I will be thankfully missing many episodes of Felicity.
So, will you be available for an update on Felicity and Ben next Sunday?
Possibly. We'll see. We'll see how many episodes I actually sit through this upcoming week.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Let's
It feels like your beef is not old shows on streaming services, but it really feels like your beef is your wife.
No, Brian, no. She is the best thing that ever happened to me, Brian. She just has questionable taste in TV shows at times.
That is the beef, though.
Well, it is the
she has
beef.
bad taste
But if
in-
it wasn't available, Brian, it's like saying Matt's a bad guy because he does a lot of cocaine. That would be like blaming that'd be like blaming Matt when in essence the availability of the cocaine is what you blame it on.
I'm going to say something. You've convinced me.
All right, perfect.
You have convinced me. That absolutely is the proper way to look at it.
All right. We've got stories of the week, Brian. We always try and pick a story each that we want to make sure doesn't fall through the cracks, and we want to make sure it gets the appropriate coverage. Brian, what's the story that you're bringing to the table this week?
Ron, for my story, we are going all the way to Cleveland, Ohio, where over the past 2 weeks, over 30 children have vanished.
30.
Yes. The actual number so far right now that is being used by Police Chief John Majoy is over 27 children have been reported missing in the greater Cleveland area in the past 2 weeks. It has been referred to as a distressing number. It is something police have never seen before. They have said there is a huge concern in the local police department as to why children are missing at this unprecedented clip. Obviously, they said, there is going to be a percentage of those missing children that are running away from home.
Right.
We won't know until, those kids come back. And obviously we want all those children to return. We certainly, it was earlier, heard that a lot of people on the internet are putting an over under bet on the actual number of children that go missing in Cleveland. It's disgusting. It just, it's disgusts me what humanity is capable of. But my story is that there are 30 children missing in Cleveland. Direct, families, friends are reporting that, they're searching for the missing loved ones. All these children are ranged from age from 12 to 17. We have absolutely no understanding as to why it's happening. And it's not getting a lot of coverage in the news.
No, well, again, don't forget, Cleveland is also the location of the Ariel Castro kidnappings, where he was able to hold 3 women captive for over a decade.
Years, yes.
So
maybe
that
dude committed suicide too.
He did, yes. Maybe the Cleveland police aren't the best people to be handling this right now.
Listen, Ron, this is not a time to start bashing police officers.
All right.
I back the blue.
Okay.
I do have a black and white American flag with a blue stripe running through the center of it, hanging outside of my apartment right now. I will not allow you to besmirch the police department of Cleveland. Ron.
Yes.
Seeing as you are unable to find any of those lost children, I think a good use of your time right now would be to tell me what your story of the week is.
So my story of the week, Brian, it goes, we're going down to Maryland for this one, where roughly 800,000 Maryland drivers with license plates designed to commemorate the War of 1812 are actually inadvertently advertising a website for an online casino based in the Philippines. We've got a photo of the license plate here. In 2012, to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812, Maryland redesigned its standard license plate to read Maryland War of 1812, and then have the URL www.starspangled200.org printed at the bottom. These were issued to every driver from 2012 to 2016. Apparently, someone forgot to renew the domain name in the Maryland state government. It used to drive people to a website talking about how Francis Scott Key was inspired to write the Star Spangled Banner, and now instead it shows a blinking bikini-clad woman advertising Philippines' best betting site.
Question: how many people in do you believe in Maryland have actually deposited money on that website in the hopes of video chatting with that woman?
I'm
Instead
gonna
of just clicking off.
I'm gonna say, the number's probably up there. I'm gonna say about 25,000.
Now, is this a specialty license plate that you have to go out and pay extra for?
This was not a specialty license plate. This was an updated design that they put out starting in 2012 and used for 4 years until they changed the design.
Interesting. Well, all right, Maryland. Question, Ron: have you ever had a license plate personalized?
I have not. I have never really thought of anything that would be worth the money to personalize a license plate.
Okay.
What about yourself? I mean, for the short period of time that you were driving.
No, I read something very early, many years ago, that you do not want to have a personalized license plate because it is easier for people to remember. That, if your license plate was like Poonhound, everybody would be, as soon as people saw that license plate, they would sit there and be like, oh, Poonhound. So that if you were driving and smashed into an 87-year-old woman, as
Right.
your car tires bounced over her body, crushing her to death as she turned her body into a measly stew, everybody would be like, yeah, they would be like, do you remember anything about the car? People behind you, yep, Poonhound. And now they know exactly who you are. While if your license plate is a randomly generated string of letters and numbers,
Right.
people would not be able to automatically remember your license plate.
So you're saying having Ebola out on Poonhound would be like worst case scenario.
Correct.
Nice Seinfeld reference from
Oh, I
Janelle.
love the
Ass Man
Seinfeld
plate.
Ass Man. Are you the Ass Man? That was so good. Billy says one of his friends has kayfabe for his license plate. See, now and I always felt that if I were to be a driver, I would absolutely hit and run.
Really?
Yeah, I don't see myself like if I were driving and I just slam into like some guy and watch him like go flying off to the side. I think I'm hitting the gas and just driving away.
You're just
I
out of here.
can't help it. My instinct has always been just like get the fuck out of here real fast.
So in a fight or flight situation, you're choosing flight 99% of the time.
Well, no, I mean, once you've hit somebody with your vehicle and they are on the ground, I don't think there's a fight there, Ron.
The fight's over.
The fight would be when I'm locked up in jail,
Right.
And suddenly my virgin rectum is being passed around by the 12 guys that are locked up in my cell. That's the fight. Who's going to make me their bitch first? That's what people will be fighting over.
That would be a good over under. How many people would make you their bitch within your first week of being in prison?
I would say 4.
Over under as to how many centimeters your anus would be dilated after a week in prison.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Wow, Janelle bringing the heat, saying you run away from your own shadow.
I don't think that's fair. I think that's a slight exaggeration.
A little bit.
Yes.
Let's get into some of the other stories we have for this
Sure.
week. Months ago, I'm sure many of you remember there was the story about the 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio who was unable to get an abortion in Ohio
She ran away from Cleveland, correct?
Possibly, very possibly. But due to the new abortion laws that were passed after the repeal of Roe v. Wade, And a doctor from Indiana who treated the girl had drawn national attention to herself after speaking publicly about the case. Now she has been reprimanded by the Indiana Medical Licensing Board. This is after the state's Republican Attorney General filed a complaint about her talking about the case, saying that it violated HIPAA laws. A majority of board members found that she had violated privacy laws and voted to fine her $3,000 in addition to the reprimand.
Is there a crowdfunding out there that we can
If
contribute
not,
money for her?
I think we should find her. This is Dr. Caitlin Bernard. At the hearing last Thursday, she said she spoke out about the case to inform the public about the impact of state abortion laws taking effect across the United States.
Okay, and that she's not related to Caitlin Bernard, the Canadian actress.
I am not familiar with Caitlin Bernard.
Who was on The Sinners, also acted in The Healer, Father's Nightmare, Mom's Day Away, Home Killing Queen.
No, not familiar with that at all. I did not realize you were such a fan of Canadian actresses.
I'm going to say this to you. I think that due to their lax production laws and taxes, I think some of our finest acting is being performed north of the border.
Interesting. All right. I mean, I respect your opinion.
Do you? I don't think that's ever been the case.
It always has been. I always respect your opinion, regardless of how wrong it may be. I respect your opinion. I respect your opinion.
Nice. All right. That's fair.
All right, going down to Tennessee, a Tennessee woman who was denied an emergency abortion for her life-threatening ectopic pregnancy ultimately became infertile and was forced to have an emergency hysterectomy to save her life. The woman, Mayron Hollis, gave birth prematurely through a cesarean delivery, but for the last several months now, her infant has been in and out of the hospital as Hollis's staggering medical bills continue to pile up.
Fucking frightening. I mean, it is absolutely frightening. The rush to restriction that the right has leapt forward, almost in a leapfrog style of who can put out a more restrictive law on abortion. Obviously, knowing that it's going to be dragged into the courts,
right?
Like it is, and this isn't a theoretical argument. These real lives are being affected. Women are their lives are their safety is being jeopardized because the states that they live in are prioritizing an unborn glob of cells over their life.
Right. And in this particular case, Hollis and her husband, they'd had their first child in February of 2022. She became pregnant again shortly thereafter, which concerned doctors because she had had a cesarean delivery. And when you become pregnant again within that short period of time, you increase the risk of a cesarean scar pregnancy. It's a type of ectopic pregnancy in which the embryo implants in the cesarean scar from her previous C-section. In August, she learned that her pregnancy, she did have that. Her pregnancy was already bulging out of her uterus and that she had a placenta accreta, a life-threatening pregnancy complication that occurs when the placenta grows too deeply inside of the uterine wall. She tried to go to Pittsburgh to have an abortion because the laws in Tennessee not only restricted her from getting an abortion, but would have punished her if she had left the state. And then everything just snowballed to her having to have a hysterectomy. And now, thanks to laws designed to protect life, she will not be able to have children again.
Tragic. That is a tragic story.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's there's no other word for it.
That is just tragic.
So
Jesus, that is a depressing story.
Right. And as Ali rightfully says, abortion is healthcare, literally. And in this woman's case, 100% true.
Wow. Okay. America, there's literally one thing to do, and that is to go to your Go to your voting booths, when it comes time to vote, and vote for candidates that will represent the views that you have. We don't have a lot in this country. I know we like to talk about ourselves as being the freest people on earth. Really not the case. But one thing we do have is the right to vote into and out of power our representatives in state governments, local governments, federal governments. That vote is the most powerful thing that you have, and a tragic number of Americans do not use it on a regular basis.
Without a doubt. And if
I
you have
think
the
that if
ability to vote by mail, especially here in Pennsylvania, you have I think another 3 months to register to get your
Mhm.
mail-in ballot. But wherever you are, just double check, because just having been registered for voting before doesn't mean that you might not have been expunged from rolls, because that's the playbook for the GOP. For the GOP is to try and get people kicked that are registered for voting to be not registered, so you can't vote when you try and
Mhm.
go vote. Just saying.
Yeah, it's very concerning.
We forgot to put this story on the main agenda, but I wanted to get your opinion on this. You have a very unique political, constitutional view on life. I know I'm always interested to hear your thoughts on things. The listeners are always interested to hear your take on
Sure.
different things. So I want to give you this story from a township called Long Lake Township. A gentleman by the name of Todd Maxon. He apparently liked to collect cars, fix them up. He had a number of cars on his property, apparently more than the township ordinances would allow. He had paid a fine one time and said he would keep his number of cars under control. Then his neighbors started to complain. So the township spied on his car collection with a drone. And now it is up to the state Supreme Court to decide if the township violated his rights by flying drones over his property without any type of permit, warrant, what have you. I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Okay. Did they fly the drone above his property, directly above his property, or did they fly a drone over a neighbor's property and angle the camera over towards his property?
According to this article, and he has a very large plot of land, so they had to fly it over his property once in 2017 and again in 2018.
I mean, I think what we're talking about here is, we're talking about, the introduction of drone use. I mean, if they were standing on the outside edge of his property on land and were able to look into his property, that would be absolutely illegal. They're not allowed onto his property. However, if they're flying above, like, what are the air rights to a piece of land is really what it boils down to.
And I think that's what the township is arguing is, if you own a plot of land, at what point does your property
rights end? I think that number has to be determined. Because the thing being is the fact that, where does this go? What is the extreme? You can announce that an airline does not have the right to fly over your land 30,000 feet in the air, at which point you are absolutely, practically unaware that airplane is flying above your land.
Right.
And at the same time, you're sitting in your backyard with Mrs. Ron, enjoying an adult beverage after making your world famous burgers. And are the police allowed to just fly a drone 2 feet above your head?
It seems like they shouldn't be allowed to.
They shouldn't be able to, but there is a point at which point your logical claim for air rights over your land has to end.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Again, I think it's borderline illegal, but again, you can't own the airspace over your property. It's a very, I think, kind of gray legal area. So we will see. I feel that it will not stop at the Michigan Supreme Court. It's probably something that I think will escalate to the U.S. Supreme Court at some point.
Does the article state how many cars he had? Because
It did not.
I do feel like if the answer is 4 and he's got a large piece of property, we don't have a problem. But if we're talking like, 86,
I want to say it was more than 10. I don't know if it hit 86, but it was probably in the ballpark of like 15 to 20.
were any of them wheelless and on cinder blocks?
According to the article, a number of them would start when he would put the key in and turn them. So the majority of them were working vehicles.
How do they know that he would put the key in and turn them on if they were not spying on him?
This was the initial inspection.
Got it.
Prior to them doing the drone afterwards.
You know what? Until we come to an understanding of how far your vertical rights to your land are, I think you have to side with this guy.
I would agree with you on that. But we'll keep
I
an
do
eye
believe,
out to see what happens.
Absolutely. Is there anybody betting the over-under on how many feet above your land your air rights claim is?
We will talk to DraftKings and see if we can get some a parlay together on that.
Ooh, I love a good parlay.
You do. Brian, we started a new segment last week, which has already swept the internet. It has gone viral in the past week. It's called But the Drag Queens Are the Problem.
Of course.
At first when we started this, we were like, will this have legs? Will there be stories that we can point to each and every week? And sure enough, I think we've got 2 this week, Brian. Which one would you like to start off with?
I would think we should start off with listen, you know me, I like to always go with Pennsylvania. Any opportunity I have to put you on the hot seat and make you defend your state, that's always going to get my vote.
All right, no problem. So this is in the Elizabethtown area middle school, a paraprofessional by the name of Megan Carlisle. We've got a mugshot for her right here. She is a 37-year-old teacher's assistant. She was fired for allegedly having sex with a 15-year-old student after sending the boy nude photos of herself on Snapchat. She allegedly fondled the boy while he was under her watch during an in-school suspension on April 28th. Carlisle allegedly had reached out to the boy on Snapchat after school let out on the day of the in-school suspension. The two allegedly began discussing sex on the app, and Carlisle sent explicit images of herself to the boy and his 16-year-old friend. That night, the woman then allegedly picked up the boy in her car, and they drove to an empty parking lot where they had sex. Afterwards, the school employee allegedly sent the boy $20 for food and purchased him vape pods, which she gave him on the next day.
Jesus, his dick game must be good.
So she was arrested.
I mean, she's giving him food money and she's buying him vape pods. I mean, he dicked her down good.
So Carlisle was arrested on May 25th. She remains jailed in the Lancaster County Prison with a $200,000 bail.
I thought prison was where you went after you had been found guilty, and jail is where you're held while you have outstanding charges, but there has not been any trial yet.
I've got no answers for you.
I always thought that was the distinction.
I would agree with you. Maybe they don't have a jail in Lancaster.
It is Pennsylvania.
It is. You never know.
For a time period there, I didn't think that they had internet out in Lancaster, but I was proven wrong. People. So the drag queens are the problem, but teachers right now in their mid-30s having sex with how old was the boy?
15.
15-year-old boy, fondling him in school, and I'm not hearing any Republican outrage against the teacher profession. So drag queens are the problem, apparently.
Well, Brian, not just in the United States, not just in Pennsylvania, going all the way across the world to Australia. We've got a similar situation there. This is Chelsea Jane Edwards, a 28-year-old teacher at Indooroopilly State High School in Brisbane, Australia. They will just name schools anything.
Atrocious. It's atrocious.
So she was charged in March with 2 counts of grooming and 1 count of indecent treatment of a child under 16. She apparently had contact with the child on various occasions from July to September 2022, when the grooming offenses allegedly began. The state accuses her of, quote, willfully exposing the child to an indecent photo in September. The documents further allege that she engaged in conduct with the intent to procure the child to engage in a sexual act in Queensland between July 7th and September 14th.
Did she send him $20 for food?
It does not appear that way, no.
Did she buy him any vape pods?
Not according to this article.
Does the story mention at any point whether she bought him a switchblade or not?
No, does not. A switchblade. Interesting.
Because my understanding is that when she showed him the switchblade that she bought him, he said, "That's not a knife. Now this is a knife." And then he pulled out a huge blade from behind his back. You didn't see that one coming?
I should have. I should have
absolutely
but I
seen
did
that
not.
coming.
I'm actually a little disappointed in myself.
Ron, I'm disappointed in you that you did not see that Crocodile Dundee reference. Just telegraphed.
Yes. Let's have a uplifting, heartwarming story, Brian. Al Pacino announced this week that he is going to be a father again at the young age of 83.
83, you say?
83, and he has impregnated his 29-year-old girlfriend.
All righty.
And this follows the recent story of Robert De Niro just having a newborn child at age 79.
Mm-hmm. Hold on.
Does De Niro get to say that one?
No, much less. The crowd cares much less about De Niro. Okay. We are both white males over the age of 50, correct?
We are, correct.
Okay, now, what type of ejaculate is coming out of an 83-year-old man? Now, obviously, I don't know about you, Ron, but I have not watched a lot of pornography with starring men who are in their 80s. I said I haven't watched a lot. That doesn't mean I have not watched any.
Right.
That would be a lie, and I do not lie on this podcast. It's always the truth. I have watched some. I have not watched a lot. I'm trying to see if you're 83. Just first off, I can't even imagine the dosage of Viagra you have to take to achieve an erection. Then it's like, what is the viability of the? And now keep in mind, I will acknowledge they're both Italian men who are known for their virility.
Okay.
I'll cut them, there you go. Cut them a little slack here. But what is the quality of the sperm that is existing in Al Pacino's ejaculate at the age of 83?
Listen, apparently it's potable. Apparently it's good enough.
Potable, that means it can be drunk. It can be, you can drink it.
All right. Well, I mean,
apparently, she wasn't drinking it if she's pregnant. Like, clearly that's not where it was going, Ron. Now, do you think that he and Bobby, as we, his friends Bobby like to call him Bobby, do you think that he and Bobby were planning on becoming fathers around the same time?
Maybe so. I mean, what's interesting is Pacino has a 33-year-old daughter with Jan Tarrant. So his daughter is 4 years older than his girlfriend.
Oh, so awkward.
And his girlfriend, prior to dating Pacino, she also reportedly dated Mick Jagger when Mick was 74 and she was 22.
And she also dated another, like a billionaire, I believe.
She dated a 60-year-old billionaire, Nicholas Bergeron.
Listen, kudos to this woman. She clearly has a type. She wants older men who are going to be able to afford a lifestyle for her.
But what you know, for both De Niro and Pacino, like it feels like they're literally setting these children up for childhood trauma. Because think about if you were 6, right? If your dad
Mhm.
died when you were 6,
No, he
how
died
would
when I was 50.
understood. I'm just saying, if when you were 6, if your dad had died, wouldn't that impact you? Wouldn't that like
Yes.
so what are
But
the
I
odds
think this
these
but
these kids are gonna be dealing with the deaths of their fathers so early in their life.
this is the selfishness of the Al Pacino and of De Niro, who are literally only thinking of how can I get a 20 some odd woman into bed naked for me to have sex with, and then the pompous egotism to sit there and be like, yes, I'm going to I'm going to bring in a life into this world right now. Ron, what do you think is the appropriate age when somebody should stop having children?
You know, I don't know that that's for me to judge, Brian, but it feels like if you were have a greater chance of dying before your kid is an adult,
Mhm.
maybe you need to kind of revisit that.
Okay.
So just
I
saying,
don't disagree with you. I
just
mean,
throwing
I
that
don't
out.
know that there's a specific age, but I do think that, I mean, this is, 83. This is, you're not ready to be a father anymore.
Like I'm 52 now, and I feel like I would be too old to have a kid.
Yeah.
Because
I
like,
can see that.
do I want to be the 70-year-old dad at my kid's high school graduation? The
Well,
answer
I
to
mean,
that
if
would be
if
no.
you're it, if you're interested in trying to pick up some of his classmates or her classmates,
Oh,
depending
there you go.
on the gender of your child, I mean, they could be a they. It could be a they. I don't want to say his or her. It could be
Right.
they, but like maybe you want to hit on their classmates.
Brian, another segment we started a few weeks back. We haven't had an entry in a while. A little something we like to call "fuck around and
Mhm.
find out." Brian, you found a story this week. I'd really like you to talk about what happened with this particular story.
This story takes us all the way out to Queens, New York, one of the 5 boroughs often overlooked when people think about New York City, one of the most populous boroughs in the city, also clearly the most ethnically diverse borough in New York City. We are going out to the Kew Gardens section of Queens, known for its diversity, we'll call it. A 65-year-old man shot and killed a younger man who tried to rob him in a Queens parking lot 2 a.m. early last Wednesday morning. Cops say the gunfire erupted around 2 a.m. on 82nd Avenue in Kew Gardens, literally blocks away from the Queens Criminal Court, when a 32-year-old victim approached the older man with a sharp object. Police said he demanded cash and cigarettes, though are not currently sure what the sharp object was. The 65-year-old man reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, fired a few shots at the alleged thief, striking him several times in the chest. Police were immediately called, and the 32-year-old was pronounced dead at the scene. According to the superintendent of the building which owned the parking lot, he had a gun in his hand, gave him ample time to retreat, go the other way, and the guy was just not budging. Said after a surveillance video of the incident. Listen, Ron, I'm
Yes.
not encouraging vigilantism.
No, because it feels like you have in the past.
Not at all. But I am going to say fuck around and find out. Seeing a 65-year-old man walking through a parking lot is not an invitation for crime. If you are walking the streets and you are looking to rob, mug, attack people, it is time that there is a sense of fear that is put back into your brain. Here's a guy who thought that this old man was just easy pickings and is no longer on this mortal coil. And I shed not one tear for him.
All right. That's your prerogative. I mean, you do have to be careful when you fuck around because a lot of times you will find out.
You do find out.
Brian, you and I, both Apple fans, both use their products,
Love Apple.
their TV, iPads. We're both recording this on MacBooks right now. And back in April, they launched a high yield savings account with an annual percentage yield of 4.15% in partnership with Goldman Sachs. But a month later, some account holders are apparently struggling to move their money out of the account. Georgia resident Nathan Thacker told the Wall Street Journal that he has been trying to transfer $1,700 from his Apple account to JP Morgan Chase since May 15th. Every time he tried to contact Goldman's customer service department, Thacker was told to give it a few days. The money finally hit his Chase account last week, but only after the Wall Street Journal contacted Goldman Sachs.
Well, that's
apparently
reasonable.
This is becoming a big issue with a number of people. I will say, for anyone that has had to use the Goldman Sachs customer service for their Apple Card, it is absolutely horrible. So,
Ron, you had any experience with the with Goldman Sachs customer service? No,
I do, which is why I no longer have my Apple Card.
I still have mine.
And how is it?
I used it a couple times, and it's perfectly fine.
All right. So this is interesting. At the end of the launch week, there was about 240,000 accounts opened, customers depositing $1 billion in the first 4 days.
Listen, anytime you are sending some of your money to an institution, you are always running the risk of, how do I get this money out of the institution? I mean, I think we all remember the great movie with Johnny Depp that was Blow, where he brought all of his illicitly obtained money down to Panama, where he thought it was going to be safe. And suddenly the government just closed the banks and kept all the cash.
So
it taught me the lesson.
So you're equating Goldman Sachs with Panama, is what you're saying.
Panama. Sorry.
Matt just walked out. Apparently his mom works for Goldman Sachs. He took that last story very personally.
Well, now we understand how he can afford all that cocaine.
That's very true.
His mother is purchasing all that cocaine for him.
Brian, it seems we go back and forth week to week over whether we have stories from Florida, whether we have stories from Texas. This week, it is Florida, a tragic story, this one. A Florida mother was busy shoplifting inside of a department store when her car suddenly burst into flames with her two children trapped inside. Alicia Moore, 24 years old, parked her car outside the Dillard's department store at the Oviedo Mall on May 26th with her two young children inside. She went inside with a man who had not been identified. He allegedly began stealing from the store, and nearly an hour later, so she left these kids who could not care for themselves, should not have been left unattended, left them for an hour, and found the car engulfed in a massive blaze. Now, thankfully...
Yeah, this is rough. This is a rough story.
Thankfully, shoppers and witnesses helped rescue the children inside. One child suffered first-degree burns to the face and ears. The other suffered smoke inhalation and thankfully no major burns. She was arrested and charged with aggravated child neglect and arson, as well as petty theft and battery charges. She's currently being held in Seminole County Jail on a $48,000 bond.
There you go. I mean, what would you do to her?
I mean,
I think you got to take the kids away. No,
I have a feeling that's probably. Let me see if it says in the story. It doesn't really say. I mean, obviously, with her being in jail, the kids are probably somewhere in the foster care system, which is always a roll of the dice too.
It's tragic, and I don't know. You hear so many tragic stories coming out of it.
And if she's being charged with arson, then she must have done something that led to the fire in the car. Like, I don't know if she left a cigarette burning or something, but clearly the police feel that she's responsible for the fire starting in some way, shape, or form also.
Tragic, just a tragic story.
Also, a couple weeks back, there was a story about a Florida parent who had Amanda Gorman's poem removed from school. It was the poem "The Hill We Climb." Was removed from a local elementary school, and now the parent, Daly Salinas, admitted she never really read the poem.
We are becoming a stupid country.
Becoming? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say we've hit that.
We are pulling works of literature. We are pulling works of literature from schools based on the complaints of people who haven't actually even exposed themselves to it.
Yeah. And she not only complained about that, she complained about other children's titles such as the ABCs of Black History, Cuban Kids, Countries in the News, Cuba, and Love to Langston, because they included, quote, references of critical race theory, indirect hate messages, and gender ideology and indoctrination. In a May 24th interview with the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, Salinas was asked about her book challenges, as well as, shockingly, anti-Semitic content found on her Facebook page, including a disturbing post with a list of steps for how, quote, Jewish Zionists would achieve world domination, including, quote, replace royal rule with socialist rule, then communism, then despotism, and sacrifice people, including Jews sometimes, when necessary. For the interview, Salinas, who says she has a deep opposition to communism due to her Cuban heritage, admitted that she hadn't read her questionable post beyond the word communism. She also noted that English is not her first language, and that apparently she loves the Jewish community.
Sure about that?
I mean, and I just can't with Florida.
It's really out of control. It's genuinely out of control. The desire to force an agenda on other people. Like, whatever happened to these are just my views and I don't really care.
Right.
It's now like, these are my views and everybody has to now live under what's convenient for me and what I look at. It's fucking ludicrous.
Like, it's okay to disagree, but why do you have to?
Well, no, it's not.
Well, no, I'm saying, like, it's okay. Like, in theory, it's okay to disagree. Why take these books and these poems? Like, if you don't want your kid reading the poem, then don't have them read the poem. Why feel that you should be the judge, jury, and executioner deciding what content should be allowed out there?
Because we are so empowered to stand up and shout out our views as if they are correct. It's wild. It's absolutely wild to me. Ron, can I ask you a question?
Well, that depends what that question is, Brian.
What are you watching?
What am I watching? Actually, I only watched one thing this week, Brian, and it was The Curious Case of Natalia Grace on the ID channel. The Curious Case of Natalie Grace. No, or Natalia. It depends who you're talking to. So it is the story about.
Is this another one of your wife's choices?
No, this actually, I kind of wanted to see this based on the trailer. So as the story goes, Natalia Grace was a girl from the Ukraine who was adopted at 6 years old by a couple. The couple then claimed that she was actually an adult posing as a child because she had a certain body dysplasia disease. But the problem with it's 3 episodes, like 3 or 4 hours. One of the problems is it is primarily told from the viewpoint of the husband. Like, he's the only one. The husband and the oldest son are the only ones who really participate out of the family. His ex-wife, Natalia, didn't really participate, and he is just this over-the-top drama queen type guy. And there's just both he and his wife really seem like horrible people. And
really, in what sense?
Just, they basically believed this girl was an adult, and they ended up abandoning her, a 9-year-old girl who, again, the the special doesn't really prove one way or the other how old she is, but I think it's fairly safe to say that she is a kid or was a kid when they adopted
Really?
her. They basically left a 9-year-old alone in an apartment and ended up getting charged with child abandonment. And so you kind of see how the story progresses over the years, and the father ends up going to trial in the final episode. But it was just very not cool, William. Very not. It wouldn't be one. I mean, if you're interested in the story, I would watch it. I don't think it was a very well done documentary. I don't think it had a neutral viewpoint. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, definitely considering that it's, told from the father's perspective.
Right.
Who might actually agree with William Esquire, which just makes it all the more problematic.
What are you watching, Brian?
First off, if we do not acknowledge the series finale of Succession,
okay,
I highly recommend it, Ron. I know that you did not, you were not on the Logan Roy bandwagon. You are not a shareholder in Waystar.
Maybe I'll try and get back into it now that I can just binge watch maybe I'll binge watch Succession while my wife is watching Felicity.
Sure. Or you could wait 24 years and then your wife will be like, hey, I'm going to watch Succession. Do you mind if I put some TV on while you flip through your phone?
There you go.
While you'll be at the age of 83, trying to figure out how you can impregnate your wife.
She'll be too old to impregnate. I'll be looking for a 29-year-old.
You're currently looking for a 29-year-old. Hey now. So watch the season finale of Succession. Really well done. Just an amazing show. I give them a lot of credit for wrapping it up after 4 seasons and not trying to drag this out into 6 or 7. Obviously, the money was going to be there, but they took the high road and said, listen, this story can be told in this period of time. We're going to tell it, and then we're going to move on. Really well, highly recommend it.
Now, do you find that when at the very end, Patrick Duffy wakes up and you find out that it's been all of a dream, did you find that was kind of a cop-out, the way they ended it?
Hold on a second. To me, the fact was that they did not do a close-up of Patrick Duffy in the shower. They did, they pulled the camera back for a wide shot. I mean, the fact that he was willing at his extended age of 83 to just go full on frontal nudity. I mean, the fact that you saw his Franks and Beans there, as they end the series, as Pam Dauber, who was Morgan Fairchild. She had like reddish brownish hair. I keep wanting to say Pamela. Am I right or no?
I'm not 100% sure, but I will allow you. I will allow you to continue to guess. While
I'm sure, I'm hoping somebody's looking that up right now. Anywho, also saw the series finale of Ted Lasso, which I think had one of the strongest first seasons of a show in a very long time, only to have really, I guess, just gotten worse and worse. That by the time season 4 rolled around, and I think it was season 4, it might be season 3, it doesn't matter. I didn't even really care what was going on in the story, but I had already watched enough episodes. His character's wife was Pam. Who was the actress, William? Who was the actress? Literally was just praying for each episode for it to be the series finale. But of interest, what I would like to point out is on Amazon Prime, I watched a documentary called Wrecking Crew.
What is this about?
It is a documentary, Victoria Principal. Yes, we all should. As a young-blooded boy in the 80s, that name should just be emblazoned in my brain. The Wrecking Crew. It is a documentary about a series of studio musicians that were in LA in the 60s, 70s, late 50s. They were a group of 20 to 25, a collective studio musicians, including people that went on to be famous like Glenn Campbell, Leon Russell. But the idea was that these guys were and women, excuse me, they're not just guys. This group They were unofficially called the Wrecking Crew, but ultimately they were the de facto backing band for almost every hit record that came out of the LA music scene in the 60s. See? He knows what I'm talking about.
That's a great comment.
But he then contradicts himself with this comment.
Right.
Anyway, but basically it was on, back then music was very singles driven.
Right.
So there was very, it wasn't as focused on a full album. So you would have these bands that would write a song, would go into the studio, and the producers would hear the band, write the song. Then they would bring in these group of it was a collective. So it wasn't always the same group of people, but this mixture of like 20, 25 people would come into the studio, perform the recorded version, improve on the song, add notes to it, and were never afforded any type of public acknowledgement that they had performed on the album. So, the case that is the first one that comes to mind is the early Beach Boys music.
Right.
Where it was not being performed by any of the people that was on the album, but it was performed by the Wrecking Crew, who would sit there with Brian Wilson, and he would kind of walk them through, this is what I want this song to be. And then these studio musicians would basically take a song and just do it perfectly. That would be the released version. And we're given no credit whatsoever for decades.
Like not even royalties or anything of that nature? Wow.
Because they would collect a scale paycheck for their work for the day, and then they would move on. And when the music would be released, it would be like music by the Beach Boys, recorded by the Beach Boys, instruments played by the Beach Boys.
Interesting.
And kind of the facade was cracked basically with the Monkees. When the Monkees was a famed TV show about these four guys that were in a band, and it came out that it suddenly became very public that they did not play any of their instruments.
Wait, the Monkees didn't play it? Wow.
But back then there was such a nobody. It was never spoken about that there were these studio musicians that were doing it. Very, it was one of those things where you're flipping through, a streaming service trying to figure out something to watch, and you click on something, and within, 10 minutes or so, you're like, this is interesting. You have my attention, and I'm along for the ride.
All right, Wrecking Crew.
And even Wrecking Crew on Amazon Prime.
All right, Brian, another great episode, I think. We are getting ready, of course, to move on over to After Dark, which will start at 9:30. It's especially for our Patreon subscribers, which if you want to join, go to ronandbrianpodcast.com. Click in the upper right-hand corner. If you subscribe with the $10 level or higher, you get to join us live. Last week was fantastic. It was our month-end pajama party. Our Patreon listeners got to join us. We did a rousing edition of Can You Beat Brian? It was a hard-fought battle, which was won by a friend of the podcast, Janelle, in tiebreaker fashion. Did Janelle decide who her $50 donation was going to?
Never was. I was going to give her another day and then reach out to be like, hey, you've had a week. Give us because there is a $50 donation to the charity of her choice. Waiting for her to pick which charity. Last time she beat, I believe, you a month ago, and it went to Planned Parenthood.
Maybe she'll send the $50 to that Indiana doctor that got that $3,000 fine. Just a suggestion, but it's hers to pick. It's hers to pick.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we are going to get ready for that. We appreciate.
We didn't forget, Janelle. We didn't forget.
We always are on top of things. So we're going to get ready to do that. We appreciate all of you joining us this Sunday night. Brian, anything else you want to bring to the table before we wrap this up?
Listen, I know, we like to talk about, listener of the week. The listener of the week is this person right here. If you're on the video chat, you will see exactly who I'm talking about. I think it goes without saying. I mean, comment of the week right here. I know that in December we put together our comment of the year bracket, sponsored by our favorite Russian beer, Oberon, wasn't it? O'Brien, I don't know. Anyway, this is my vote for comment of Oh, yeah.
All right, fantastic.
All right.
Well, thank you all for joining us, everybody. Patreon folks, we will see you in about 20 minutes. Everybody else, we will catch you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Ron and Brian podcast. We're live each week on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can find prior episodes, links to our social media, and everything else Ron and Brian at ronandbrianpodcast.com. See you